Hi, I am Lynn Odell. I am the coordinator for the Every Learner Everywhere at Indian River State College.
Hello, I am Lanie Culligan. I am a mathematics instructor at Indian River State College, and I am calling in from Okeechobee, Florida. So from a young age, I knew that math teaching was my calling, and that sounds so cliche, but I knew that I wanted to help people. Math was something that I really enjoyed because it is very straightforward, and honestly, it's something that a lot of people struggle with, and I hear all the time in my classes that math classes are their roadblock to keep them from graduating, to keep them from achieving their goals. So I hope to help students pass these math classes, achieve their goals, and become better for it. So that was my kind of way, I guess, to contributing to society and kind of taking my math skills that I enjoy doing and applying them to a career that I love.
Well, I'm Kris Demarais. I work for IRSC, which is Indian River State College. I serve as a faculty for mathematics. I'm from a big family. I'm one of 13 kids. So I've always been kind of having a knack for teaching because I had to teach my younger brother and sisters. I went ahead and just did some soul searching, and everything pointed out the fact that I needed to be a teacher. Became an instructor for IRSC, which I have been loving ever since. I mean, they are a really good school. They care about student success, which is something I make a priority for myself.
Hi, I'm Heather Michaels. I am Department Chair of Physical Sciences at Indian River State College, and I teach all levels of chemistry. So I graduated in 2012 with my PhD. And when I graduated, education was not my game plan. I went right into a postdoc doing biomedical research. So I was front lines of drug discovery. And during my time in research, I started adjuncting here at Indian River State College. And I actually found myself more interested in the interaction with students than I did going to lab every day. So I just was starting to feel like my impact was greater in the classroom than sitting at a lab bench.
I'm Anthony Dribben. I'm the Dean of Math and Science at Indian River State College. We're in Fort Pierce, Florida. We have branch campuses that serve the entire Treasure Coast area here in Florida. Yeah, the pandemic has changed life quite a bit. Professionally here at the college, we've moved completely to remote instruction. We finished out the spring semester from spring break forward. We transitioned and pivoted all of our face-to-face classes to online to finish out the spring semester. This summer, we're doing everything through remote learning and online instruction. The campuses are fairly deserted. There's only a handful of folks that are still coming into the office. Most of our folks are working remotely from home.
Changed a lot. Just trying to figure out how to work from home and not go into the office. It takes a lot to get used to. And also defining the lines where work stops and home life begins has been very difficult. And it's not just for myself, for the faculty that I work with as well.
So I think the pandemic has really affected our interaction with students. I think they've lost a lot of the connection to their classes that they used to get from being in a classroom, and we're losing them. We're losing their interest. So having our online tools like the adaptive software we've been using is at least keeping them somewhat more engaged than just posting a lecture.
In the sense of the instructional part, the instruction has been enhanced, actually, giving me the opportunity to allow students to ask those engaging questions and be able to just, effectively reach students where they are.
Like, if we can conquer this, we can conquer anything. And I say that knocking on wood, because who knows what's out there, because who would have thought that this would have happened. Everything is now laid out as an online course. So even though it's still face-to-face, I have all of that supplemental material available to them virtually. So that way they can go through, and if they miss a day and they're sick or whatever case may come their way, they will be able to have the support behind them on a virtual setting, and they're still able to learn remotely if needed.
And so when Every Learner Everywhere came about, I learned it from Lynn, and I had a very open mind to be able to do it. Every Learner Everywhere had a symbol behind, it stood for something. We're talking about student success. Each student is uniquely different. So we want to go ahead and identify their potential by going ahead and looking at what it is that we can do and tweaking our systems. Our systems aren't perfect. I mean, nobody's is. But the thing is that we're going to try to find an avenue that's going to work.
Our math department had just finished up a 5-year project as part of our QEP for reaccreditation, and it really was looking at redesign of the math curriculum for intermediate algebra. We developed a quantitative analysis, quantitative reasoning math course for non-STEM majors. And so the math department had been very engaged in trying to improve success rates and student, able to move through their math courses they needed. And so I saw this as another, just another thing we could add to that project that had already been done. Another way to help improve student success, a way to be able to give students a little bit more personalization in the classroom, because the software being adaptive is able to pick up on things they need to have reinforced. So instead of an instructor having to spot that through the grading process and say, oh, this is an area you're a little weak in, you might need to kind of bone up on this. The software is doing it for you sort of automatically. So I think we just saw that as a great way to help boost student success in our courses. My vice president, Dr. Belmont, kind of brought me into the loop when she was first contacted by ATD. And so she and I kind of had a couple planning meetings. We brought in Lynn Odell, who was sort of our coordinator. And we began sort of targeting specific classes and faculty that we might want to approach to see if they'd be willing to pilot the use of the adaptive courseware in their classes. And so from there, we began reaching out to those faculty members to see what they might be interested in doing. We put together a workshop last summer, and ATD brought some folks in for that workshop. And then from there, it kind of took off. Lynn was really the organizing force, getting data and things from the faculty members. And so from my perspective, I was much more hands-off at that point. Once you get good faculty engaged in that process, it takes on its own life from there.
Because we came off of that 5-year research project, our math instructors were really in research mode, and they were really have embraced trying to find new innovative ways to teach our students. So on the math side, it wasn't difficult at all. I just asked the math faculty and the 2 specific courses that we had identified who would like to be a part of the Every Learner Everywhere. And we had multiple instructors that stepped up and wanted to participate. It didn't even hesitate. But I think it had a lot to do with the 5-year project that we had just come off. They're already in that mindset of, okay, we need to do everything that we possibly can to help our students. This is just the next step. On the chemistry side, we had one chemistry instructor that stepped up and said, I'll do this. And now she is the department chair. And so she has been sharing with the other faculty, this is working. I've noticed that it's improving. And so, like I said before, now all sections of the Intro to Chemistry are using the adaptive feature. So she got buy-in from all of the instructors.
In my quantitative reasoning course, which is MAT 1100, that is the non-STEM liberal arts class. In that class, what they do is it's all about what's called the pie. So in the pie, what we do is they take an original diagnostic, And from that diagnostic, the software creates their own prescription, so to speak, of the skills that they need to work on, and it marks as mastered the skills that they already know. So throughout the course, as their homework assignment, they work on completing this pie. So as they work on this pie, it is adaptive in the fact that, for one, it's created just for them. For two, they have to go through, and as they continue working on their pie, the questions that they get right, they have to show mastery by getting it right 3 times in a row. And if they do not get it right, it kind of knocks back, saying, okay, that we think that you got it, but now you really didn't get it. So let's go back and let's try it again. So that building block idea of practicing, and then not only practicing, but reinforcing the skills. So, and then they have periodic assessments where they say, okay, you've shown that you mastered it, but let's make sure that you're retaining it. That is a piece in this course that I find specifically helpful, especially for the final exam. I've seen that final exams improve because they're constantly being tested and to see, are you retaining the material, which is so helpful in math as everything's a building block. So next semester, are they just going to forget about everything, or do they retain it using this adaptive piece? So that's been super helpful. In my intermediate algebra course, that is the STEM based gateway course, they are using it more as an assessment piece. So what they do is they practice on their homework, and then they get to what's called a pre-quiz. That pre-quiz is kind of like a practice test for them to see, okay, what do you really know and what do you really not know, even though you think you might know it. And then from there, it will create a new assessment in which it marks whatever they know and whatever they mastered correct. And then they're left with the pieces that they don't know. So it's really specific for them about what piece are you missing in order to be successful on the test. So it's almost like a test prep and an assessment in one. So it's kind of like a pre-assessment before we actually get to the test. So hopefully it'll kind of maybe enlighten them and maybe open their eyes a little bit before we get to the actual assessment, because of this adaptive piece of saying, okay, here's what you think you know, but what's missing in your skills. So that adaptive piece is pretty cool. And it seems that students have really benefited and enjoy the fact that it's personalized specifically for them, and they are spending their time wisely by working on the pieces that they do not know, opposed to working on skills that they've already mastered.
I delivered some instruction to open the student's mind to a concept. And then it's the way the it's the way the course is designed. It's designed to be a collaborative working environment. So I allow then the students, once I introduce them to the topic, have collaborational time. Well, we're in a computer setting, so because the students are then able to figure out the book work, and that book work comes from this text, all right? We go ahead and give them opportunity to work, and then explore that deeper on a more personal level on the computers, where they centered in on their ideas, on their deficiencies, on the things that they needed to work on, that were tied together to the objectives of the book. So that connection allowed them to make understanding of what we're learning, as well as then practice it, but they also still had support with each other. They sat next to each other at the stations, so that while they're working on their, maybe lack of proficiency in an area, they had their buddy to turn to and say, you know what, I'm troubled in this area. They didn't have to always ask me, because I wanted to encourage that development on not asking the primary instructor, but asking each other for development and growth, for them to grow in the material, but at where they are. And that's what I loved about the adaptive part of that, is that I had heard students talk to me and say, Mr. D, this was such an informative way of doing it. I didn't feel like I was being, taught something and then bypassed because I didn't understand something. They said it allowed me, when I didn't understand, to go back, because it adapted and said, these are areas that we needed to work on. So that the program tailored instructional pieces for their needs. And that sold me, and also gave me the opportunity to see such phenomenal growth. The students had shown such superior energy. It's like there's such an air about the class that showed the students actually were invested in this program.
I chose to use the adaptive software to implement a flip style class where the students are doing the adaptive software at home for homework, basically getting their lecture done at home. And then we come into the classroom and do small group work assignments. So I'm able to help the students with what they're struggling with rather than spending an hour and 15 minutes just talking at them.
Seeing the adaptive learning classes versus the non-adaptive learning classes, it's very interesting for me to see, do the students even realize what's going on behind the scenes? I try to tell them, you know, how it's helpful to them and how I feel like it should be beneficial, but I really want to see their perception of it and how they perceive this new adaptive learning. Do they think it's more work? Do they think it's less work? Do they think that it's any benefit to them to have it be adaptive? I found that my students really like the individualized piece where everything is meant specifically for them. And I really feel like it's helping them learn their study skills. So that way they're seeing, okay, what do I actually need to hone in and study on versus my traditional classes that are my controlled setting where they're all just studying the same thing, whether they know it or not. So it's really cool, especially in this pandemic time. Time is limited. You know, we have everyone's busy, everyone's schedule's been awry from all this. So it's really cool to see how we can really hone in and use every minute to our advantage to improve our skills. In our quantitative reasoning courses, the piece of the pie, which we're talking about from the software, has been amazing. The adaptive pieces are perfect for our students. I feel like compared to traditional settings, they are really getting that sense of individualized attention. And I feel like in online settings, it's hard because we have so many students, we're not face-to-face, so I can't have that personal relationship as easily. So I feel like this individualized piece kind of helps them, and it helps me to make it more individualized and help me know their strengths and weaknesses, and also help the students know their strengths and weaknesses.
It was a different energy than those energies, because I taught this class where it's primarily just instruction and the students are just sitting there working out of the book. They don't like working strictly out of books. It's just not, this level of student does not work well with that kind of environment where they're forced to read everything all the time, and you know they don't have anything immediately responding to them. Whereas the adaptive, it's like they have this help button. It's like, okay, they can see an example and mimic and model after what it is they're doing, and they don't need to ask me all the time, which is a problem because they don't feel a sense of independence and a sense of confidence boosting when they're just sitting there having the instructor give them everything, spoon feeding it. That doesn't work. It allowed them to work on deficiencies that they otherwise would have been bypassed and they wouldn't have understood because they've been, just overlooked. Because a lot of times as instructors, like I said, we go ahead and blanket our instruction to the overall global, but don't focus in on the individual. And that's what the adaptive part does. And that's all thumbs up from me.
60 to 70% of my teaching load is organic chemistry. So organic chemistry 1, organic chemistry 2, and the labs that go with it. In those classes, I don't have a problem getting the students engaged. So during lecture, I can ask questions and people will talk, ask questions themselves. I can get them writing. I can get them taking good notes. The interaction's really high in organic chemistry. However, in intro chemistry, I find that I'm standing in front of 30, 40 students that won't ask questions, that aren't taking notes, that are texting, that don't come to class prepared. The engagement's been really, really low in intro chemistry classes, and probably all intro classes. They're just not interested in it. So those classes have been a really big struggle for me because I have such a big difference between highly engaged organic chemistry, absolute no engagement with the intro chemistry. So introducing the adaptive learning has made the class time more enjoyable. The students have some knowledge before they come into the classroom. They are taking better notes because they're actually taking notes. They have questions from what they did before they came to the classroom. I very much prefer the way it's been going. Class time, I'm enjoying it more. So that, of course, helps because I'm more engaged. So then the students are more engaged. And you can imagine if you don't have to waste a whole lecture teaching someone a new language, then you can actually have a conversation, right? The adaptive software definitely eliminates me having to stand in front of a classroom and define to a student what an atom is and all of that. We get the language part of it done, so then we can do the application part together.
Working on this PI in the quantitative reasoning course is awesome because they do have great learning analytics. I could see exactly the skills that a lot of students are struggling with, and that helps me as we go through. For example, my class met once a week. So as each week we go by, I can really see a list of, okay, what topics are the students struggling with? So that way helped me guide my lecture into what should we start off with and what do they need kind of a recap on, even if we did a little warm-up assignment of, hey, let's kind of recap and let's do this problem together in groups, whatever the case may be. But that helps me really hone in on the skills of what are they getting and what are they not getting. So what skills do we need to focus on in class versus what skills that they've already mastered. In the past, I was just kind of going off of a gut feeling of what they knew and what they didn't know, but this is great, solid evidence and solid data on what do these individual students know. Every class is so different. So it's really hard as a teacher to be flexible and to really understand our students as to what skills they really need. And a lot of times they tell us that, oh yeah, we know it, but they might think that they know it, but the data shows differently that they don't know it. So that's really cool to see from a math standpoint, especially, what does the data say? What is the data telling us? What do they need reinforcement on? So it's definitely helped to guide my lectures and guide what topics we're going to cover. I hate to say lectures because we're not lecturing in class. It's more of a collaborative learning environment. But what are we going to cover in class that day?
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, is completion. The data, I needed to make sure that they were completing their materials. However, the data showed that the students, although this was so, so informative and so great for the student, not all students were able to keep up with the amount of work because they couldn't move past go sometimes. But it allowed me to interact with the students and trying to provide them the opportunities to, to continue to be pressured a little bit to getting their things done, because the data spoke to that. This level of student wasn't very proficient at just being self-driven and self-motivated. So the data let me know who I needed to target for that more personal instructional pieces. Like I had some who were flying off the charts. I saw people who completed the program they were very much ahead. So it tailored my instruction for each individual on it. Now I was able to then target those who needed me most and not just go ahead and waste time with somebody who already knew the material. That's how the data spoke to me. It changed the way I assisted the student.
I look at the data. I mostly have been able to see who's not doing the work at home, because then during class time, obviously, I know I need to sit down with this student, remind them that part of their agreement is that they're going to do the work at home. But I also know that I'm probably going to have to spend time with this student, getting them caught up because they didn't do the work. Otherwise, they end up just sitting in the class with no clue what they're doing. So that component has helped a lot. Our software has checkpoints, and there's certain checkpoints that students often get stuck at, and I'm able to then spend more time in the class focusing on those checkpoints and why that's a common area that students are getting hung up on. So it just helps me focus in during class time on the important stuff. What is the common problem?
My adaptive courses, I don't feel take more time. It definitely took more time setting up from the get-go, but once they're set up, obviously, it was different. So that was one thing. Once they're set up, it was pretty similar as going through. It was a little bit more difficult to say, hey, on question 3 on the homework, my traditional class was easy because everyone had the same number 3. But in our adaptive piece, everyone was different. So that was my only difference I see in actual presenting presenting the material. Time-wise, I wouldn't say once we have it set up, it was pretty similar. It does take me a little time to go over the analytics, but I'm a little bit nerdy, so I like to go over the analytics and I like to see what my student data is.
I mean, obviously changing a course at the beginning of any semester, there's, you know, the initial investment of time. But as the semester progresses, all the worksheets, all the plans are already done for during class time. So other than peeking in at the analytics and seeing what I really need to focus on during class time, I don't think I've committed any more time than a normal semester.
From colleague to colleague, it's really helped as we are in constant contact with our little Every Learner Everywhere grant committee, so to speak, our committee that we're in, as we're always talking to each other on what's working, what's not working, what are they experiencing, what's worked for them, what's not worked for them. So it's really helped to make us become closer on a more personal level, because the math department is a bigger department. It's kind of hard to get to know each other on an individual level, especially I'm out here at a satellite campus in Okeechobee, where the main campus is an hour away. So a lot of times I don't get to communicate with these colleagues on a regular basis, but this has really allowed me to communicate with them and see what's working. And it's really helped me to improve my courses as learning from them and learning to see what they're doing, what works for them. And it's really helped me to grow on a personal level with them, to say like, hey, you know, and it's kind of almost like built friendships through this.
This definitely gave me an opportunity to spend time with people that I never would have been able to spend so much time with. There's people in the math department that I never get to spend time with that I've, you know, gotten to talk to a lot, trips and all of that. At the conference, I got, after my panel talk, I think 6 people stayed and gave me their business card because they wanted to know the data at the end of our project. So lots of connections that I wasn't expecting, which is cool.
Just the support of the dean of our department. He has been wonderful. Our vice president has been wonderful in getting us involved. This has been a great experience for me to be involved. I'm closer to the faculty that attended the 2 conferences that we went to. I really got to know them at the conference, made some cross-state connections at one of the conferences, somebody that I've been wanting to catch up with at another institution. I met someone at actually Miami-Dade, and I heard about some things that they were doing, and I was trying to find a contact at Miami-Dade, and I ended up meeting somebody at the conference. And now we communicate regularly with what they're doing and what they're trying, and we share. So it's even helped that between institutions.
We put together this team that really worked together. Quite a few of these folks traveled to the different, the ELE convening and the ATD Dream conference, getting to talk not only amongst themselves within the discipline, but throughout the college. You know, the English faculty across the way are doing a lot of the adaptive features as well. And so it really opened up some conversations that way. They'll, you know, a lot of times in a fairly large college like we are, you can kind of get siloed in your own discipline. So being able to expand, and even in our own college, and talking with faculty and other disciplines that are trying to do some things, I thought that was very, very useful. And then going to these different conferences and convenings where you could talk to faculty in the same discipline, but from other colleges, that was tremendously valuable. Our folks really got a lot from that, made a lot of connections and interactions that are moving forward. So that was a lot of value with that as well. Of the Florida colleges that were part of the grant, some of them are fairly close to us. Broward and Miami-Dade are right down the road, and we'd have some connections with their folks, but this really fostered a little bit more bridge building with them, not only on the adaptive feature, but some of the other projects that we got going on. It just kind of opened some doors for us, and so that has been really nice to see. But then just like I say, talking with faculty, you know, I kind of stood back at some of those meetings we were at in either Minneapolis or Washington, D.C., and just seeing my folks interacting with faculty from other institutions and staff from other institutions. It was just really kind of cool to see. You see a lot of, you know, ideas going back and forth, and, you know, hey, this worked for you. How can we do this? And things like that. It was great. It's a really collaborative experience.
in my intermediate algebra class, just being honest, we're trying to find something that works best. So we started this ELE project last fall, and what we did, we thought didn't work. From focus groups, from data, it felt like a great idea, but our students were getting overwhelmed. It was just too much of the adaptive piece. So we cut back and we changed, and that's the great way of piloting. You know, we can see what works, what doesn't work, and we can make changes based off of the data. So based off of that, the committee came back together, and as instructors, we knew it wasn't working as we've seen the frustration in our students. So we really got to change it this semester and say, okay, how could we change it to make it work better? So we changed it to have not necessarily less adaptive pieces, but less, there was just too many assignments that were built in, which it seemed in our mind, it was easier because they were smaller chunks, which was easier. But in the students' mind, they just seen all these lists of assignments, which was too much. So we kind of found ways to kind of bring the two benefits together and hopefully make it merge better.
Well, our English folks are part of the Every Learner Everywhere, and for them, this has not been an easy process for them because there isn't anything out there yet that they have come across that really fits their needs. And so I think that's been the most frustrating part for us, because they know that they need to make changes, but there's not a lot out there. And I know when we went to the various conferences for the Every Learner Everywhere, and then we went to ATD, the frustration, it wasn't just with our faculty, our English faculty. It was frustration that we heard from other institutions, their English faculty. They felt the same way. So I think that's been the most frustrating for us, because they really want to try something and they just can't seem to find anything out there.
Well, anytime you're doing a pilot, there's always some roadblocks or obstacles you have to overcome. Sometimes it's just the minutia of getting the software set up, getting your students enrolled into it, access codes, things like that. We have a fairly significant dual enrollment population that takes some of these courses, and so we have to coordinate with the high schools and the school districts who provide they get the access codes from the bookstore and from the publishers and provide that. So there's a lot of coordination involved, and sometimes that, the class can get started, but it sometimes may take a week or two in some cases to get everybody fully enrolled, engaged into the class and into the software and get going. Some of the feedback I got from certain faculty was that, for some students, the adaptive feature, they kept having to go back and repeat certain things over and over again. And so they end up giving them a considerable workload compared to some other students. And for some students, particularly the weaker students who are in some of these lower level math classes, if the workload gets too much, they're just going to give up. And so that's always like sort of a compromise. You want to have that adaptive feature to help, reinforce those weak topics, weak areas, but you don't want to build it up where it's so much workload where they just get swamped by the amount of work they have to do and just fail. So that was the other part of the challenge. There's still some work to be done. We still got to get it figured out a little bit so that we get the positive features we want from it to reinforce the weak topics, but not to be an overwhelming amount of work for the students.
Faculty that share the innovative things that they're trying in the classroom, and that are very passionate when they speak about what they've tried. They're excited about how things turned out when they tried new things in the classroom. That's the faculty that I would recommend that a coordinator would reach out to, because they're already in that mindset of, okay, I need to change the way that I'm teaching. I need to improve. It's a constant cycle of improvement and innovative ideas. Our student populations they're constantly changing because our society is constantly changing. So as an educator, you always have to be thinking of the next best thing that you can do to help students learn. And so when you've got a faculty member that's constantly sharing, oh, I found this new app and I'm using it, or I think, we should use this technology in the classroom, that's the faculty you want to really tap into, because they're already in that mode of trying new things. Well, and that's the whole thing about research. You don't just do research in a bubble, you do research and you share. That's the whole point of doing it. So you want faculty that'll be willing to attend a conference and share, or to be part of a presentation, or, you know, to share what they're doing. Even the good and the bad, not just things that were miraculous and were wonderful, but also those things that they've tried that didn't work. Like with our intermediate algebra, the adaptive feature, just, they feel like it's just not doing what they want it to do. But if we try it in the next level course, maybe that's the student population that it works best for. So being willing to the good and the bad. I think one thing that I have learned that our institution has adapted is the use of focus groups, regular focus groups. We started doing focus groups with our quality enhancement plan, our 5-year research project, and we learned so much from our students and our faculty, because we included faculty, and then we included academic support center tutors that were involved in the program, that it now is part of our institution. It is a vital piece whenever you're doing any kind of research, even this adaptive, just to get that input from the students and the faculty that are involved in an environment that's confidential, that they can feel like they can share and speak up. We've made a lot of changes because of the focus groups and the input from our students. I mean, we're doing that's why we're in business, to serve students and to educate students. And I think sometimes institutions forget, at the end of the day, you need to ask them too. We can make a lot of assumptions that this is great and innovative and it's going to solve all our students' problems. But if you don't ask them, you know, you might be burdening them with more work than what they need and able to learn. That's what we learned in our intermediate algebra class, just by talking with the students, that the way we had the adaptive features set up in fall just compounded the amount of work that they had to do, to the point that some of them, their math class was the only class that they had time to do anything in. And that's not what we wanted. We wanted it to enhance their learning, not hinder their learning. And had we not sat down and talked to the students, we would have never, unless they would have come and told us, but giving them an environment where they could speak up and tell us was very beneficial. Another suggestion would be share with the students that are in these courses, because they're going to talk to their friends that are maybe in a different section. And so they're not surprised that they're in a class that's a little different than their, you know, their friend or whatever. So just letting them know that this is a course that we're trying something new in, that certainly makes a difference.
I'm going to say that the energy that I was looking for in these classes, it encouraged me to continue it during the summer session. Right now, I had a choice between the adaptive or the traditional that we were using before, and I quickly chose the ELE.
From all these benefits, I definitely plan to continue to use these adaptive pieces in these courses, and then we're now planning to continue to expand it to other courses. So the next course that our students would take after our intermediate algebra course would be college algebra. So we are planning to extend this, the nature of these adaptive pieces into our college algebra classes, which is awesome. I feel like that is the whole point in piloting, and that is the whole point in trying new things, is then let's expand it and let's grow on it and let's broaden it to other areas.
AT 1105 is college algebra. Now, I can see this program being most important for that level of student right there. And I am more interested in being a primary instructor for 1105 and taking what I've gained from this into that level. That class is so critical, that is the official gateway course.
So we're full steam ahead with this software that we adopted for intro chemistry. I actually just got done going through our virtual campus master course and implementing the adaptive software into the master course. So now anybody who teaches the online intro chemistry has to use the adaptive software because our master course has it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Our institution is all about moving forward. And it comes right from, you know, Dr. Massey, our college president. And it, you know, everybody. That is one great thing about our institution. We are allowed to be innovative and we're allowed to try. And if it doesn't work, then you start over and it's okay because at least we tried, you know? So we're an Aspen winner. And I think that's the whole point of Aspen institutions is the fact that you're innovative and you try and your primary goal is student success. Student success is our #1 goal at Indian River State College. And that's why we do what we do.
Oh, absolutely. We definitely want to increase and continue using the adaptive feature and talking with the math faculty. I know one of my math faculty is telling me that she would like to implement some of its use in her business calculus class. And so that's one of the nice features. Once we start piloting this in a few classes and faculty start getting a little bit used to it, they start realizing the value it could have in other classes. So it starts to expand. You start seeing it get used in other things. In the sciences, I've had some conversation with some faculty in biology, particularly our life science course, who are thinking about, hey, this might be something we could use there as well. And they just made a textbook change, and the textbook they're going with has some adaptive features in it. So I think we're going to start seeing this adaptive expand in its use, absolutely. Particularly as more vendors and things become available, more of the online homework system start realizing its value and start expanding that into their offerings. I think we're going to see it being used more and more.
Yeah, so this adaptive piece has definitely helped my students, and I feel like because it's helped my students, I just feel like it has helped my students in the fact of we see the data, we see what they're talking about in the focus groups. It seems to be working well, especially in our quantitative reasoning courses where those are our students that are really struggling and they really come in with a fixed mindset that they don't like math, they don't want to be in math. So this has really helped them to make it a little more attainable and make it a little more personalized for them so they can focus on their own weaknesses and then grow from there as an individual. So based off of this report, I feel like I've really helped me and my students be on the same team in order to reach their goals.
One of the big things, we had a data presentation a couple of weeks ago where some of the folks from Achieving the Dream shared with us some of the data. We have been pulling data to reply to them with our data, and they did a lot of the analysis of the data, and they showed us that in some of our courses, particularly the Math 1100 course, which is our non-STEM majors math course, the performance boost that we saw, the equity gaps really dropped tremendously. We saw tremendous improvement in student success rates for our minority populations, and much more than we had expected, much more than we had really observed from our own just analysis of the data. And it was really tremendous to see that, because we're always looking for ways to decrease that equity gap. And seeing that the adaptive feature, implementing that in those pilot sections really did that, that was a major boon for us.